Welcome to a Lagos love story and audio story of Rume and Jumoke. If you're new to our channel, we invite you to subscribe and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our frequent releases of captivating tales and stories created by us for you to enjoy. Don't forget to leave a like to show your support. For our loyal listeners, welcome back, we're excited to have you. The Peter John and Samuel families were two of Lagos' most powerful and long-standing rivals. Both families had built empires, making their names in oil and real estate, and their fortunes had turned them into legends in Nigerian high society. But beneath their wealth lay a grudge as deep and ancient as the Lagos Lagoon. Decades ago, in the early days of the oil boom, the families had worked together. A bitter business dispute, however, had torn them apart, and the scars left behind had hardened into resentment. Neither family could remember a time when they were not at odds. The feud became generational, passed down to children who knew little of its origins but were raised to hate and distrust each other. The rivalry shaped their lives, their choices, and their views of the world, becoming a cycle too fierce to break. And while Lagos changed and grew, the Peter John and Samuel families remained steadfast in their animosity, each swearing to outdo and outshine the other. Among the younger generation of these families, few felt the burden of this rivalry more than Rume Peter John and Jumoke Samuel. Rume, a quiet and reflective young man of 23, had grown up under the weight of his family's expectations. As the heir to the Peter John name, he was expected to carry on their legacy. But Rume was a dreamer, more interested in literature, poetry, and social justice than in oil fields and corporate deals. He often felt out of place in the glittering world of Lagos's elite, longing for a simpler life where he could pursue his true passions without the constant shadow of the family name. Jumoke Samuel, on the other hand, was fiery and unapologetically bold. At 22, she had a spirit that matched the vibrant streets of Lagos. While her family urged her to embody grace and elegance befitting a young woman of her standing, Jumoke preferred a life on her own terms. She was an artist, drawn to the colors and textures of Lagos life, capturing its beauty and chaos in her paintings. Like Rume, she chafed against her family's expectations, yearning for a freedom that felt always out of reach. The night of the African Heritage Foundation Gala was a grand affair, with Lagos's high society gathered to celebrate culture, history, and philanthropy. The ballroom, a historic building overlooking the Lagos Lagoon, glittered with chandeliers and mirrored walls, filled with the hum of conversation, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. This event was one of the rare occasions where both families would be under the same roof, though they carefully kept their distance. Rume arrived reluctantly, following his father and uncle's sheer gun into the room, feeling out of place among the people he grew up around. He found himself drifting away from the crowd, seeking the quiet refuge of the terrace. The open air felt freeing, a reprieve from the weight of his family's expectations pressing down on him inside. He looked out over the lights of Lagos, lost in thought, wishing he could be anywhere else. From the corner of his eye, he noticed a flash of color, someone stepping out onto the terrace. She was dressed in a flowing, bold Ankara gown, her figure framed against the city skyline. As she moved, she seemed to carry with her a spirit that matched the lively streets of Lagos itself. It was Jumoke, though Rume didn't yet know her name. She was unaware of him at first, focused on the view, her face set in contemplation. Without thinking, Rume found himself drawn to her. When she finally turned and saw him, their eyes met, and for a moment, the noise of the gala faded into the background. They exchanged a tentative smile, both hesitant but intrigued. "Beautiful night, isn't it?" Rume said softly, breaking the silence. "Yes, it is," Jumoke replied, her voice steady yet curious. "Sometimes, it's the only thing worth looking forward to at these events." They stood together, speaking in low voices. It was as though they were the only two people in the world. They talked about the city, their dreams, and the weight of their family's legacies, neither realizing the other's last name. Jumoke spoke of her art, the colors and shapes that defined her life, while Rume shared his love for poetry, words that painted pictures of a world beyond the confines of wealth and rivalry. But as the conversation continued, Rume felt a strange tension. He could see the same fire in her eyes that he often glimpsed in the mirror, a yearning to escape the life laid out before her. "So, whose family is keeping you prisoner at this grand event?" he asked with a half-smile, trying to lighten the mood. Jumoke hesitated. "The Samuels," she replied, her gaze suddenly guarded. Rume's face faltered, his heart sinking as he realized who she was. He knew the name all too well, had grown up hearing about the enemies his family swore to outdo and despise. Jumoke, sensing his change in demeanor, quickly guessed the truth. "And you're in Peterjohn, aren't you?" she whispered, her tone a mix of disappointment and disbelief. They stared at each other, the weight of their family's feud suddenly a wall between them. But something else lingered there too, a spark that neither could ignore. In that moment, they were not Peterjohn and Samuel, but simply Rume and Jumoke, two souls yearning for connection. "I should go," Jumoke said, turning reluctantly. "Wait," Rume called after her, his voice filled with an urgency he hadn't expected. "Whatever our families say, they don't know us." "Not really." Jumoke hesitated, glancing back at him. "Maybe not. But they define who we're allowed to be." We're not supposed to," she trailed off, unsure of how to finish her thought. "Then maybe it's time to stop letting them define everything," Rume replied. His words were bold, but his heart was pounding with the realization of what he was suggesting. They shared one last look before reluctantly parting, each of them torn between the life they had been taught to uphold and the person standing before them. The brief encounter left an indelible mark on them both, a whisper of possibility in a world bound by old grudges and high walls. In the days that followed, Rume and Jumoke tried to shake off the memory of that night, but the connection they'd felt lingered like a song stuck in their minds. Rume found himself walking through the streets of Lagos, hoping for a chance encounter. Likewise, Jumoke couldn't stop thinking about his words, the gentle intensity in his eyes as he suggested they could live beyond their family's limitations. Eventually, they both realized they couldn't let go of what had blossomed between them. One evening, Jumoke took a bold step and messaged him, suggesting they meet in Yaba, far from the prying eyes of their family circles. When Rume saw her message, his heart leapt, and he responded eagerly. They met in a small art cafe in Yaba, a haven for Lagos's artists and poets. It was the perfect setting for two people who felt out of place in their family's world. The cafe walls were adorned with local artwork, vibrant pieces that mirrored the chaos and beauty of the city outside. They found a quiet corner and sat close, speaking in whispers as if sharing secrets. In their stolen moments, they spoke about everything, their frustrations, their passions, the hopes they dared not share with anyone else. Jumoke showed Rume some of her sketches, capturing Lagos's vibrancy and resilience. Rume, in turn, read her one of his poems, a piece about finding light in a world of shadows. Their conversations became a lifeline, a space where they could breathe freely. But as the days passed, their feelings grew deeper, and the risk became greater. Jumoke confided in her cousin, Isioma, who was the only person she trusted enough to know about her secret. Isioma supported her, though she cautioned Jumoke about the potential consequences. Similarly, Rume shared his feelings with Baba Larjar, a wise elder who had mentored him in poetry and social issues. Baba Laja was skeptical but moved by their story, offering them advice and cautioning them about the complexities of love across such deep-seated animosity. As the weeks passed, Rume and Jumoke's connection only grew stronger. Their secret meetings in the art cafe became an escape from the world that sought to keep them apart. Each moment together was charged with the thrill of something forbidden, but it was also bittersweet, as they knew their time was limited. Their family's old grudges hung over them like a dark cloud, and they could only keep their secret for so long. One evening, Rume and Jumoke found themselves on the rooftop of an abandoned building overlooking the Lagos Lagoon. The sunset cast a golden glow over the water, and as they watched the waves, it was easy to pretend, even if just for a moment, that they were free to be together without consequences. "Rume," Jumoke said softly, breaking the silence. "Have you ever thought about what life would be like if we didn't have our family's history? If we could just be?" Rume sighed, taking her hand. "Every day. I think about it every day. I wonder what it would be like to walk down the street with you, introduce you to my friends, bring you to my family. But it's hard to even imagine." Jumoke looked down, a mix of hope and sadness in her eyes. Sometimes I think maybe, just maybe, we could make them understand. If they saw what we have, maybe they'd let go of the past. Rume shook his head. You don't know my father. To him, pride is everything. The thought of even speaking civilly with the Samuels would be an insult. He'd never allow it. Jumoke's grip tightened. Then let's run away. Leave Lagos, leave everything behind and start fresh somewhere else. Rume smiled at her, but his expression was tinged with sadness. And what kind of life would that be? We'd be fugitives from our own families, cut off from everyone we know. They sat in silence, feeling the weight of their dilemma. The world they came from was unforgiving, a reality they could not simply escape. As Rume and Jumoke's love deepened, the risks of their relationship grew. Jumoke's cousin, Isioma, kept their secret loyally, but she warned Jumoke that people were beginning to ask questions. The Samuels and Peterjohns had strong networks in Lagos, and secrets were hard to keep. One evening, after another secret rendezvous, Rume was confronted by his younger brother, Tundi. Tundi had followed Rume out of suspicion, sensing that something unusual was going on. Rume, Tun said, his voice laced with accusation, where have you been sneaking off to lately? I saw you tonight, meeting with a woman. Who is she? Rume's heart raced, but he tried to remain calm. It's none of your business, Tund. Tun's face darkened. I've seen her before, you know. She's in Samuel, isn't she? Rume was silent, and the silence was answer enough. Do you have any idea what you're risking? Tund continued, his voice rising in anger. If Dad finds out, he'll be furious. You're putting our entire family's reputation on the line for some girl. She's not some girl, Tundi, Rume replied firmly. She's someone who understands me in a way nobody else does. Tun's expression softened slightly, but he shook his head. I can't believe you're risking everything for her. If Dad finds out. I won't tell him, Rume, but you need to end this. It's only going to bring trouble. But Rume couldn't imagine life without Jumoke, and despite Tundi's warnings, he continued to see her. Eventually, the inevitable happened. One evening, Jumoke's father, Chief Samuel, found one of her sketches, a portrait of Rume she'd drawn in a moment of longing. Chief Samuel's face twisted with fury as he confronted her. Who is this? He demanded, holding the sketch up to her face. Who is this man? Jumoke's heart sank, but she stood her ground. His name is Rume Peterjohn. Chief Samuel's face turned pale with rage. A Peterjohn? After everything our family has suffered because of them? Have you no shame, Jumoke? It's not like that, father, she pleaded. Rume isn't like the rest of them. He doesn't care about the feud. He just wants to live his life in peace. Chief Samuel's voice was icy. If you think I will allow my daughter to be with Peterjohn, you are sorely mistaken. You will not see him again, Jumoke. If I find out that you disobey me, I will have him dealt with personally. Jumoke knew her father's threats were not empty, but she was determined. That night, she sent a message to Rume, telling him what had happened. They agreed to meet in secret, knowing the risk but unable to stay away from each other. Meanwhile, Rume faced his own confrontation. His father, Chief Peterjohn, had heard rumors and confronted him with a steely gaze. Is it true, Rume? Chief Peterjohn asked, his voice cold. Are you seeing a Samuel girl? Rume took a deep breath. Yes, father, it's true. Her name is Jumoke, and I love her. Chief Peterjohn's face twisted with anger. You would defy everything this family stands for? Risk everything we've built, just for some girl from the family that has been our enemy for generations? She's not just some girl, Rume replied. She's the person I want to be with. Chief Peterjohn's eyes narrowed. Then you are no son of mine. The words hit Rume like a blow, but he held his ground. He had made his choice, and he would stand by it. Realizing that they could not be together openly, Rume and Jumoke devised a plan to leave Lagos and start a new life together. They knew it would mean abandoning their families, their friends, and everything they'd ever known. But they also knew that their love could not survive in the world they came from. On the night of their planned escape, Jumoke waited for Rume at the train station, her heart pounding with excitement and fear. But as the minutes turned into hours, she realized something had gone wrong. She tried calling him, but there was no answer. Meanwhile, Rume had been intercepted by his father's men, who had learned of their plan. Chief Peter John was determined to keep his son from dishonoring the family. As Rume struggled to escape, a confrontation ensued, and in the chaos, he was fatally injured. The last thought on his mind as he lay on the ground was of Jumoke, waiting for him at the station. When Jumoke learned of Rume's fate, her world shattered. She returned home, a broken shell of herself, unable to accept the reality of what had happened. Her family tried to console her, but she was inconsolable. The pain of losing Rume was too great to bear. In her grief, Jumoke retreated from the world. She stopped painting, stopped going out, and became a shadow of the vibrant, spirited young woman she had once been. The love that had once given her life now haunted her every waking moment, and she decided to remain single for the rest of her life. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to watch other interesting tales on our channel. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, so you won't miss out on our next thrilling adventure. See you in our next story.